So what I want you to do is look at Jen. When we first met. All right. Ready, Jen? Hi, everyone, and welcome. Planning on having a lot of fun today talking about shooting video with your DSLR. And, of course, want to make money doing it. So I'm your host today. My name is Joe Brady, and I'm here to talk about a couple of things. Let's go over the list. First of all, why shoot video? That's going to be kind of the basic question. I'm going to go through the process, the technology, the elements that make for a good video, including audio, which is a very important part, and then lastly, editing and delivering your video. Now, that's a lot of subject matter. I'm not going to cover all these pieces in depth today. We're going to kind of dip our toes in the water a little bit and show you how you can start getting into this if it's not something you've already done. So let's start with a potential client. Who is a potential client? Well, you might get a sense if you're watching our video before we actually started, and if you missed it, we'll show it again at the end, that I chose a bakery as my client, and for good reason. I could have gone to the local health food store, but then I'd have a plate of bean sprouts here instead of these amazing cupcakes, so we'll see a little more about that later. So again, our potential clients. First of all, seniors. Hybrid video using live footage and stills, very popular. Family gatherings. Birthdays, reunions, other life events, communions, bar mitzvah, etc. Just this past weekend, our studio filmed an 85th birthday party for the matriarch of the family, and people came from all over the country. And we did video and stills for that, and they absolutely loved it. Weddings, of course, but not weddings like you might be used to thinking about. We don't produce hour-long or 2-hour-long wedding videos. They're actually much shorter and something that could actually be put on YouTube or on a website. We'll talk about that a little more. And then lastly, what I'm going to focus on today, small business, car dealers, law firms, real estate, anybody having a service or a product to offer. And one of the reasons I focused in on that was, well, think about it. Have you noticed the appalling quality of commercials on local cable TV? I have to mute my television or change a channel when I see some of these car dealer and lawyer commercials. This is an opportunity. Now, if you're going to film these commercials and they're not going to go on TV, these informational videos also do very well on a company's website or on video sharing sites. It's a great benefit. Now, there's a handful of different types of commercials you can produce, and it depends on how deep and how complicated you want to get. The very simplest thing, product stills, video shots of product stills with some motion in it, combined with regular photographic stills using what's called the Ken Burns effect, where the image is moving through the video, with some type of voiceover. Next, maybe a product video, a demonstration with a voiceover, all the way up to a fully scripted live video with cutaways, which is what we're going to show you today. Now, you can create a very simple video with just a series of short shots and an audio track. Kind of to that, I'm going to show you a short little video that I just produced, actually on the flight back. I was in Death Valley a couple weeks ago, and we recorded video for an upcoming series of webinars, one part of which is how to get perfect exposure and color using the Sekonic meter and the Sekonic color checker passport from X-Rite out in the field, and how to get the best results. So what I did was I kind of created just a little teaser video. It's just a sort of bunch of short clips that I combined together and put an audio track on, just as kind of an intro to let you know it's coming. So let's take a look at that first. So that was, I guess you can probably gather, that was a fun trip and very eventful also. You might have seen I mentioned that we had 3 flats in one day going out to a place in Death Valley called the Racetrack. But it was a lot of fun, and the upcoming webinar will show a lot more detail about that. So again, the purpose of that was to try to just generate a little interest, and we'll be posting that. Now let's get into the tools so that we can take this another step. Here's the good news. You own probably most of the important pieces. First of all, a DSLR or a mirrorless camera that can record video and have manual control. I've got 2 such cameras here. I've got a Sony Alpha 99 here that's sitting on a slider. We'll talk about that later as well. And I also have my favorite little travel camera. This is a Sony NEX6. One of the beauties of this is it can record video and it can also focus while in full manual. Really like this. If you're going to be shooting interview type video, you're going to need some kind of continuous light source. We've got Pro Photo Studio lights here, but there's a whole range of continuous lights that you're going to need something like that. You're also going to need to get into audio recording gear, and this is going to be the one piece that might be new to you. We'll talk about that a little later. And then lastly, you're going to need some kind of editing software. And you can go very basic to the most advanced software out there. If you've got a Mac, you've already got iMovie on there. Windows has its own window video editor as well, but I'm going to recommend a couple of other video editing programs for Windows that I think probably would be a better way to go. Now, the skill set you need to bring to video, well, here's another bit of good news. Your photography skills translate into video. Posing, lighting, composition, they all work exactly the same way. And in fact, this gives you an advantage over people coming into this type of video creation from the video side. They're not used to creating lighting ratios and worrying about posing of a person, composition, the rule of thirds, all that kind of stuff that you guys have learned as photographers applies to video. Now, the stuff you do need to learn if you're coming from the photography side are some of the technical aspects of video. And for DSLR video, there's actually not that much to learn. You need to learn about frame rates and what they do, for example. You do need to learn about audio. Now again, not too much to learn other than we're going to want to have audio off the camera, just like I always preach, you want to have your flash off camera. And then again, you're going to need to learn your video editing software. Most of the videos you'll create at the beginning are going to be basic cuts and overlays. It's fairly simple stuff and it actually looks very clean. You can get complicated as much as you want, and some of the softwares out there like Premiere Pro and Final Cut 10 can make learning Adobe Photoshop like playing tic-tac-toe. It gets very involved, but you don't need to go there to create great video. Because maybe the most important part of video is storytelling. You need to have a plan. You need to learn to think in another dimension, and that of time. And you also need to think in terms of short shots. Now, one of the things when these cameras started doing video, and video is something very new to me, a lot of the cameras had a limit of maybe 10, 12, or 15 minutes was the longest video clip they could make, and I thought that was a big problem. I've come to learn that if you have any video clip over probably 20 seconds or so, it's way too long. And that's something I really learned that becomes a very basic part of creating good video. So let's go into some of the technical stuff. Let's start with the camera. Now, video frame rates, that's the first thing. 24 frames a second, 30 frames a second, or 60 frames a second. 24 is the cinematic standard. It's what most movies are done. 30 is a television frame rate. That's what most TV commercials done. 60 frames a second allows you to have the full amount of frames but slow things down. So you can play a 60 frame per second video at 30 frames. It'll be half speed, but it'll be extremely smooth. The shutter speed on your camera is going to end up being twice the frame rate. So if you're shooting at 24 frames a second, your shutter speed on your camera is going to be 1/50th of a second. Yes, technically 1/48th would be perfect, not enough of a difference to matter. Same thing, 30 frames per second is going to be 1/60th of a second. The other thing you need to be involved with is focus. Does your camera focus during video? Now, most DSLRs do not. Cameras like this do, since there is no mirror system in them. A camera like this can be in full manual and still shoot focused video. A camera like this is the Sony 99. In fact, let me come around here. One of the things I like about this camera is it is what's called a mirrorless technology. And it's kind of a hybrid function. It can shoot video and focus at the same time, and you can see it live through the camera. However, when you go into autofocus, it then starts to take over all the exposure stuff. So your frame rate, your shutter speed, and your aperture may change on its own. You need to turn off autofocus if you want to have full manual control. And I want full manual control because I want it just to be like when I'm doing portraits. So we'll come back to this in a bit. Now, notice that I said your shutter speeds are either going to be 1/50th or 1/60th of a second. If you really stop and think about it, that could be a problem if you're outside and you've got bright light. Because think about it, what if you've got too much light? Your shutter speed's a 50th or a 60th of a second. You can't go higher than that, because if you do, you're going to start to get kind of very weird results. It's going to start to look a little bit stroboscopic. If you've ever seen the movie Saving Private Ryan, at the beginning of the movie when they're doing the beach landing, that's what happens when you do a very high shutter speed, and it was used very effectively in there. But it gives you kind of that jittery look when you go to a frame rate or a shutter speed much higher than 1/50th or 1/60th. Now, if you're out in the sun and you're dealing with a 1/50th shutter speed, and you want to have your aperture somewhat open to not have the background all in focus, you're going to need another way to bring the light down. And to do that, you're going to need neutral density filters. Three common ones for dealing with video, and actually really the first one's the biggest. It's called a 0.9 or a 0.9. That lets in 3 stops less light than without having that filter on there. Very handy out in the bright sun. There's also 0.6 and 0.3, which are 2 and 1 stop reductions respectively. Now, if you're dealing with a scene where you've got a bright sky and then a more diminished foreground, then you might want to look into a graduated neutral density filter that would slide in a holder right in front of your lens so that you can even out the tonality or the brightness levels from the sky to the foreground. Now remember, controlling exposure when we're dealing with video is done with aperture and ISO. We don't adjust the shutter speed. So if you want that wide open aperture and the available light is bright, you're going to have to use a neutral density filter. So let's start to discuss a little bit of the metering and lighting and color, and let's do it at our bakery shoot. And let's take a look at that first, and then I'll come back and I'll answer some of your questions. So here we are at Laura's Sweets with, who else? Laura, of course. I've given Laura homework though, because in preparation for this, one of the things to make this video is having a shot list and a script, because that will really make things go a lot smoother and you won't end up missing things. Now, a couple things that we need to do in prep, and one is get the white balance down for our lights. So to do that, I'm using the new Sekonic color checker that's got a gray target, and I'm going to do a custom white balance in my camera with this. The other thing that's real important is I want to make Laura look her best. So we want to create a little bit of a gentle lighting ratio. Remember, with video you have a much narrower tonal range than with photography, but it's still important that I add a little bit of shape to Laura's face. I want to have a little bit of shading. I'm going to short light her a little bit, meaning I'm going to have the side of, my camera's over here by the way, I'm going to have the side of her face away from the camera, a little bit brighter lit. The side from the closer to the camera is going to be a little bit darker, just a smidge, and you'll love that because that kind of lighting makes people look slimmer.
I love that.
So make your customer happy. Now I'm shooting at 24 frames a second, which is kind of the cinema mode. I kind of have more of a movie look than the 30 frames a second. So I'm set there. It is fairly dim in here, so I'm shooting at 800 ISO. And because I'm at 24 frames a second, the closest frame rate I have on my digital SLR is 1/50th of a second. So that's where I want to be. And what I need to do is meter. Now I've got the dome in because I want to meter either side separately. So I'm going to meter the bright side of her cheek, and I'm getting f5. I'm going to measure the dark side. I'm getting f4. Perfect. It's a little bit less than a stop difference between the bright and dark. It's going to add a nice ratio, but it's not going to be too extreme that the video is going to have problems capturing it. Then lastly, I'm going to put the dome up, and I'm going to go right back to my camera position, and I get my reading, and I'm getting 5.6. So ISO 800, 5/6 to the 50th of a second. That's going to be my exposure, and I've got a very nice gentle lighting ratio from left to right. So after I do my white balance, we can start. Now again, the whole concept of this is we want to make it simple. I'm using one camera. I'm using a Sony Alpha 99 to do all my video recording, and I'm also recording my audio into the camera. One thing I added though, Laura right here is wearing a wireless mic. So she's got a wireless mic transmitter that is then plugged into the receiver directly into the camera. Because audio is really important. You can't get by with a video. You can have great video, and if the audio is crappy, it's not going to be good. So if you don't have a wireless mic, you have a couple other options, but you're going to have to be close to your subject. Another option is to use something like an external recorder, but then you're going to have to sync the audio together later, which is another step. You can buy a wireless receiver and transmitter system like this for relatively inexpensive. There are systems right around $100 or so. We have a baby here too. And we've got the receiver plugged into the camera, so I can change my distance however I like, but the audio is always going to be coming directly from her. A little later on I'll show you another way to capture audio, but that would require that step that you're going to have to sync it later. So I'm going to do a custom white balance. I'm going to white balance off of this gray card. I've got my metering. I know I'm at 5.6 at 800 ISO, and that's the beautiful thing. Now, as we walk around the bakery today, the beautiful thing is that I've got my meter, so I'm going to have perfect exposure every time. Again, remember, video has a much narrower tonal range latitude than if we're doing photography, and I want my color temperature and my exposure to be perfect. That way, when I put it all together later in software, I'm not going to have any brightness changes, I'm not going to have any color changes. Because the other thing in video is when you go to edit, you've got much less latitude to do that. So we want to make it perfect from the first one.
Okay.
Ready?
I'm ready.
All right, so we're going to have Laura start to recite her lines. So we're going to practice that a little bit. All right, a couple questions came through that I'd like to address. A couple of the other questions you guys have asked, I'm just about to get to, so stay tuned. And then if I didn't answer it the way you're looking for, then ask again, please. Somebody asked a question about what lens has the best potential for creating small on-site video clips. Both of the cameras that I'm using, I generally use the same kind of focal length lens. On the Alpha 99 here, I've got a 24-70 on here. And on the NEX6, this is a 16-50, but this is a APS-C size sensor, so it actually ends up being pretty much exactly the same focal length as the zoom lens on the 99. I like that 24-70 look on a full frame camera. Again, going telephoto is really going to require a very stable platform because the slightest bit of shake is going to cause a problem. Generally, I want to stay a little bit wider when I'm doing video. A couple questions about lighting. I'm going to come to that quickly, and also about metering, because that's coming up, because we're definitely going to talk about that. But let's talk about camera stability first. For important steady shots, a tripod is really important. And there are video tripods, or you can use a standard camera tripod if you're going to stay in a static position and not do a lot of movement. You might want to take a look at a video head for your tripod. Now, another option is a monopod, and I just pulled out a brand new one this morning. In fact, you see it's still got the sticker on it. And just playing with this for a couple of minutes, I've already decided I have to have one of these. This is a Benro A48, and if you want to know the model number, Jen is going to post it in the chat room. And one of the beauties of this is, well, one, you can see it's got some feet that make it more stable, and it has a video head on it. And the difference of a video head versus a standard camera still head is it moves very smoothly if I'm going to take some adjustments, if I'm going to do pans or if I'm going to do some verticals. It really makes for beautiful smooth movements. There's a slight bit of resistance on it, but it keeps everything where it should be, and it moves very smoothly. By having these 3 points of contact, my two hands and the monopod leg, you can get very steady images. Now, if you're going to go very long lens, very super long telephoto, then you're going to need to be on a full three-legged tripod because the slightest bit of shake is going to get magnified when you have a long lens. So video tripods and heads do allow a lot more stability and the ability to move at the same time compared to a standard photo head. Hand holding can also work in certain shots. You do have to remember, though, you've got to keep the focal length of that lens short, because as soon as you start getting a little bit of a zoom, then it's going to be a problem. Now, light meter, very important. You guys have probably heard me talk about light meters in photography. Also extremely important for video. Two pieces to this, metering and color. Using a light meter is going to give you professional results. It's going to keep your exposure consistent. It's going to allow you to match the exposure of clips shot in different locations, even at different times, different days. By having a meter and and getting those numbers, putting it in your camera, you're going to have exactly the same look wherever you go. And since our clips are short and they're changing from one to the other, it's really important that you have that be right, because nothing looks worse than having different color and exposure from clip to clip. You don't want to rely on your LCD or try to judge your exposure by the histogram. So let's take a look at those tools again just a little bit. Again, this is the X-Rite Color Checker Passport with the Sekonic gray card built into it. And I will use this on every shoot I go on. I will white balance using this card. It's very important you do this because remember, video is kind of akin to shooting JPEGs on a still camera. Video is compressed, and as it gets edited and then output again, it gets recompressed. So you end up with a very small tonal range, and it's very difficult to change exposure and brightness and color after the fact. You want to get it as close as possible from the get-go. And someone asked about having clips match from different cameras. That's why you need to do a custom white balance. Very simple to do. It's the same as when we're doing still. I just take a picture of this, and you don't need to fill the frame with it. You just need to have your center focusing circle be filled with the gray under the light you're using, set your custom white balance, then your color is perfect. Next is your metering. So let's go ahead and we're going to take a little closer look at the meters. I've actually got two meters here. I've got the Sekonic 308 DC here, and I've got the Sekonic 478 DR. Now the DR means it's got radio in it for pocket wizards. We're not using that for our video. So if you're just a videographer and not using pocket wizards, you can go with the D model. So let's take a closer look at the actual meter itself. Now it's set right now just to record ambient light. It's got the ambient light icon on it. So if I tap on that, I've got two video modes here. One is called HD Cine and the other one is Cine. Now unless you're a cinematographer, the Cine one is going to confuse you. It's going to introduce things called shutter angles, which we don't want to go to. We're going to go to HD Cine, which is what our DSLR video camera will do. So you can see I've got my shutter speed. I can choose my frames per second right here. And you see I have it set for 24. Now if I tap this again, let me go up. Oops, let me go back to my 24. Let me just go up and show you a couple of different settings. So there's 30 frames per second. Now, if you're really into video, you'll see that there's also something called 29.97, which for all intents and purposes is going to give you the exact same rate. That's actually the true frames per second on a TV commercial. And if I come down again, you'll see I have 25, which is actually a European frame rate. And then our 24, which is our standard cinematic frame rate. So all I do is just like when I'm doing my metering for photography. In this case, I've got continuous lights. I hit the button, and I get at 800 ISO at 1/50th of a second. You can see I've got F7. I put that in my camera. I've white balanced using the Sekonic gray card, and my exposure is going to be perfect. Now let's take a look at the 308. A little more analog system, but it works very well. Let me just kind of angle it so you can see it here. And again, I've got standard ambient readings. I hit mode, and I see 24 frames per second. And I can hit the buttons on the side to go to 25, 30, 32, 48. There's all kinds of different choices here. So I'm going to do my 24 frames a second, just like we did before. I hit the reading button on the side, and I get the same reading. I get my F7, put that in my camera, 50th of a second, 800 ISO, and I'm going to have perfect exposures. Now, just like when we do portraits, we've got the whole dome in and dome out thing going on here. So how do we use this? If we're trying to create a light pattern left to right on our subject, then I'm going to measure each individual light. So I'll put the dome in. So if I want to create a lighting ratio, I take a reading over here, I get 5.6. I take a reading over here, I get 2.2, a lot lower. So that's going to be a fairly deep ratio. But what that does is it does create shape on the face, and adding more contrast makes the face look thinner, and I need that. Now, if I want to get my reading back to the camera, then I'll put the dome out, go right back to my camera position, and in this case, since I just moved away from my light, you can see there I've got 6.3. I put that in my camera, perfect. Now, if I've got this other meter, if I have the 308 DC, the dome in this case actually slides back and forth, and there's a little attachment that comes with it. That is the directional reader. So I just slide that over top, and this will allow me to take directional readings. So you can see it's just a kind of a little cylinder with the grid on the front of it. I take my reading on either side, set my lighting ratio, whatever I want it to be, then my dome over the sensor, back to the camera, put that number in my camera, white balance with this target, and then as long as I do that for every time I change position or I change my lights, that's going to give me exactly the same color and exactly the correct exposure. And again, you want consistency when you go from shot to shot, particularly if you're shooting over multiple locations or multiple days, because when you put it all together, it will have that uniform look. If you don't, it's going to be jumpy and it's going to be looking very amateurish. Measure your light ratios. That's something that only a meter can do, because your camera can only see the sum of the light being reflected back. By knowing what the ratios are, then you can find something that's a look that you like. Maybe you like having your lights 2 stops apart, which is going to give you a 4:1 lighting ratio. It can look very nice, it's going to add some shape and dimension. You want to stay away from lighting that is too high contrast, however. Very dark colors, once they get into video, end up looking terrible because they get very compressed, and especially if you're playing back online, it can get kind of nasty. Now, we set up our basic parameters. Let's just go over them again. Choose your frame rate, 24 or 30 frames per second, 50th or a 60th of a second shutter speed. Lens selection, we talked about that. I want to stay slightly wide to medium. Again, my favorite lens on a full frame camera is a 24 to 70. You might want a little more range, maybe I know there are 24 to 105, something like that's going to be a good choice. We've metered the lights. The camera's been white balanced. We've chosen our aperture. Focus. We've decided how to handle our focus, whether we're going to let the camera mess around with it, which I generally don't recommend, or we're going to focus by ourselves, because we're not going to be doing a lot of movement while we're shooting. We'll focus, shoot, move the camera, focus, shoot. Practice this. Test some personal projects. Learn your gear to get it out of the way so that you can then start producing great videos. So let's move on to the actual video part. You want to make your videos compelling. So what you need to do is you need to think in shots. Think about this. Your viewer can only look where the camera looks. If you're at some sort of an event and you want to video it, if you're sitting in a chair, you're going to look around. You're going to look at where the action is, but then you're also going to look to the side, see what else is going on. If it gets really boring, you might be counting the ceiling tiles. When you create a video, your viewer can't do that. They're stuck looking where your camera is looking. So if you see something interesting, film it. Move around. Even though the main action is going over here, if something's going on over the corner of your eye that looks interesting, maybe someone else watching what's going on or something off on the side, include that in your video. Don't run the camera non-stop. Nothing more boring than setting a camera on a stand and letting it run for half an hour. Keep moving. Also, you want to avoid too many big wide shots. They're fine for establishing a scene, but when you start to deal with faces, you want to make sure you can see the eyeballs. You also, as I mentioned, you want to keep your video clips short. 15 seconds or less, even less than 10 seconds is better. You might have noticed in that Death Valley one, other than the final scene flying away, I think every one of those shots was less than 2 seconds. Zoom with your feet. Staying wider on the camera is going to reduce camera shake. You want to avoid long lenses unless you're on a very stable tripod platform. You also want to avoid backlit scenes. Keep the light behind you or over a shoulder, which is going to create a little bit more directional light. So if you see something interesting, shoot it. By all means, in the camera, all these cameras have these cutesy digital effects. Avoid them like the plague. When you get to your editing, text overlays are fine, but keep them simple. Don't start using real fancy fonts. They're not going to translate well into video. Audio. use an external and, when possible, off-camera microphone. In fact, let's go ahead and take a little bit closer look at audio stuff. So I'm gonna walk around here again. Now, here in the studio, I'm wearing a wireless lav mic. So I've got my little mic clipped here. I've got a transmitter on my belt, and then it's being received by a wireless receiver. Well, you can also do that on a camera. Again, one of the things I really love about this particular camera, and a lot of the high-end DSLRs have this. Over on the side of the camera, I've got ports for both audio in and audio out. So if I'm going to use something like this, which is a wireless receiver, which would pick up my lav mic, I can actually plug this directly in to the audio in of my camera. That way, regardless of where I'm standing, I can be 100 yards away from the subject, but the subject's audio is going to be perfect. Now, another thing you want to do is you want to monitor your audio. You want to know that it is coming in well. So another beauty of cameras like this is there is a headphone jack for watching or listening to my audio. So I can plug that in, put my headphones on, and I'm now listening to the audio that's coming into the system. The beauty of this is that means that my video recording in my camera also has a professional quality of audio. Now, I'll admit, this is a little bit of a pricey system. These Sennheiser wireless lav mics, this is probably about a $650 kit. However, you can find a basic, just a couple of channel wireless lav mic set. You can find them online for $125 or so. Now, if this isn't an option, you've probably seen things like this. This is a Rode stereo video mic that is sitting here on top of the Sony. These are great audio recording devices. However, your audio needs to be close to your subject. So if you're doing something that's involving voice with an interview, probably still not a great idea to rely on a microphone like this. It's certainly better than the audio in the camera, but it's still going to pick up everything. That's why the audio needs to be close. Now, this is a great audio for reference. It's also great audio when you're doing landscape, scenic kind of work. But if you're doing an interview, you need to have the microphone very close. Now, there are people that make what are called shotgun mics. They're really long, thin mics that are a little bit more directional. But it doesn't matter. They still need to be very close. Get yourself a lav mic, or if that's not an option, another option is to use an external audio recorder. And they can be something very simple and give you great results. This is a Zoom H1. And this is about a $100 audio device. And it also has a microphone in jack. So you can buy a little clip-on microphone like the one I'm wearing, plug it into here, and actually have the person wear it. They can put it in their pocket or just have it sitting alongside them. This will record beautiful audio. The downside is you're then going to have to sync it to your video. That's why you want to have a decent reference video, because when you bring them into software and you want to add this second audio, you need a way to match them up. And if you're ever curious, that's where these things come from. You've probably seen these on sets of movies. And the reason for this clap and for this motion is it's creating both a video and an audio cue that something's going to be synced up. So when someone's ready to record, if you name the scene that you're going to do, or you just have it written on here, the act of this moving plus the loud clap creates a spike in the audio recording. You'll see that spike both in your camera recorded audio and your external recorded audio. And it's just a simple issue of lining those two spikes up in your video editing software. You can then replace the camera's audio with your pre-recorded audio. It's a very important piece of the puzzle, and you really got to do it. If you're outside and there's any kind of breeze, you're going to need some kind of wind abatement. Now, on a mic like this, I actually have just a little foam ball that fits over it. It does an amazing job even when it's pretty windy out. On a bigger mic, like this Zoom recorder, or on this Rode video mic, you want to have something like this. You've probably seen these before. They have the unfortunate name of dead cats, or in this case, a smaller one, dead kitten, and it actually just fits over top of the microphone. This, as silly looking as it may be, will stop all of that kind of wind buffeting noise you would get on your audio, and you can even use it on this little Zoom recorder here. I don't want to minimize how important this is. having good audio is going to make or break your video. So you've really got to get that under control. So we've got our audio under control now. We want to keep our videos short also. So before we get into some more of the video editing pieces, let's take a look at some gear again. I'm going to take another closer look at the meters and also show you where a slider comes in to add a lot of interest in your video. So let's take a look. You can take it out. Say when.
There you go, we're rolling.
All right. So once again, I'm using the metering here because we've got some chocolate cupcakes that just come out of the oven, and the camera's meter isn't going to give us a correct reading. It's way too dark. So I'm going to take my reading of the main light coming on here. I've got 4.5 at 640 ISO. Put that in my camera. It's going to give me a perfect exposure. So now we're going to put Maria to work actually making us some cupcakes. Do your thing, Maria. Ready? So come on over and stand on this side because I want to get close up of you actually doing your thing here. So again, I'm just going to do the reading. 400 ISO, I'm at a 4. Hold on a second. That's all right, go ahead. Okay, go. That's You thought you were going to escape, huh? This won't be in. Huh? You're done. I'm just having fun filming you.
Yeah, thanks.
So something else I want to do to add a little more interest, to give us some stuff to be able to cut away from rather than just have the interview on Laura the entire time, is I've got a really cool piece of equipment here called the slider. And what it's going to allow me to do is to gently move the point of view of the camera. And I can also do this in focus at the same time, which is really cool. So I'm just going to start recording on my camera. And in this shot I'm going to do a pan where I've already pre-focused, and I'm just going to pan across the products right here. And the beauty of a slider is that it's silent and it's very smooth. So it creates a very smooth movement. There's no jerkiness in it. And I'll add a lot of interest to the shot. Okay, so I think you can probably get the sense we also had a lot of fun in the bakery, and yes, we ate cupcakes while we were there. In fact, Jen and Rick and I all took boxes of cupcakes home, which we have here as well. More later. So anyway, a couple great questions came through that I want to address a little more. Someone asked, how is the new Sakana gray card different than the Passport's existing white balance card, which is right below here. This is the Passport standard white balance card. This gray card has been added. Technically, you could white balance off of either of those. However, having something that's got a little bit more of a gray, an 18 to 20% gray, is going to give the camera a little bit more to grab onto. What I mean by that is, this card, although it's neutral, is almost white. And if you happen to be in a situation when the light is pretty bright, if the camera doesn't have some kind of data to grab onto, if it just goes to pure white and ends up starting to clip some channels, then it might not give you a good white balance off of a almost white card. That's what the gray card is for, and this is what the white balance in video cameras is generally based on. Technically, again, as long as your exposure is okay, and you're not getting close to being overexposed, yes, you could also white balance off of the standard white balance card. This just gives you, like I said, just a little bit more tooth, but great question. Someone else, they still didn't understand how I got the meter reading, so let's take a look at that one more time. So again, I've got the 478 DR here. It could be really any meter. So let me just fire it up. And it doesn't matter if your meter has cine functions or not. I've got mine set for cine, but here's what I want to do. So let's go ahead and let's get Rick to zoom in on this. We'll look closer. So right here, I've got my shutter speed set. So again, we decided that since I'm shooting 24 frames per second, I'm at a 50th of a second. And again, in this case, this meter has 24 frames a second as an option. I also chose my ISO. So my ISO is set for 800. So at that point, if I just want to get my reading back, actually if I want to do it right to this position right here, if I just hit the reading button on the side, it comes back and gives me the number. And you can see I've got 6.3 and 3/10. So my camera doesn't do 3/10, so I simply put 6.3 as my aperture at 800 ISO at 1/50th of a second, and that's all there is to it. Now, if your camera does not have any kind of cine functions, in that case, I'm just going to tell it the ISO, the shutter speed, and I'm going to get a very similar result. So you see I was at 6.3 and 3, so I was starting to get close. There is a slight difference between 1/50th of a second and 24 frames per second. In this case, 6.3 and 3/10 to 7 is, oh boy, maybe less than a quarter of a stop. So it's not enough that it's going to make a difference. Either of those numbers would work. But that's really all there is to taking a reading with the meter. And it's really important to do that because you want that consistency, and you don't want to have under or overexposed scenes. A couple of other questions. Somebody asked about the camera. Somebody asked about the camera I'm using. They wanted to mention it again. This is a Sony Alpha 99. This is a full frame camera. It's a 24 megapixel camera, and it does have a mirror technology that allows it to focus while you're shooting video if you want that option. The other thing is that it's live all the time, and it also shows you the effect of your aperture, ISO, and shutter speed on the actual scene. You're actually seeing the effect of the camera settings through here. One thing you might not realize that all cameras will generally do, even if you can't focus while you're shooting video, what you can do is put your camera on manual focus and adjust your focus first. There's a little green dot that will show up in the bottom of your viewfinder when you're in focus, even if you're not on autofocus. So that's something you could do. The other thing you could do would be to autofocus first, then turn it off. And someone actually mentioned, how can you get everything in focus? Well, it's the same rules as when you're dealing with photography. It's going to come down to, in this case, aperture. Remember, your shutter speed is set. I'm set at 1/50th of a second. So if I want a very deep depth of field, I'm going to have to go to f11, f16. The lens selection is also going to have a big effect on that. A wider lens is going to be very easy to get everything from close to far in focus. As your lens gets longer, that's going to be more of a problem. Which also, somebody asked the question about a prime versus a zoom lens. Now this is a very good zoom lens. It's a 2.8, 24 to 70 Zeiss lens. My wife has the same Canon equivalent on her camera. Prime versus zoom is not that big a deal. Yes, primes are going to always be better, but these are going to be pretty darn close. What you generally do want to avoid is zooming while videoing. The advantage is if you're on a tripod, you've got everything set. You can then just change your point of view a little bit by zooming and then filming again. Zooming while you shoot, probably not a good idea. It's usually going to look cheesy. Another question was, how can you keep your handheld shots steady? And again, the lens selection is going to have an effect on that. Keep things a little bit wider. If you do that, and use your camera strap, because that gives you a reference or a strength point. Well, again, we've got these 3 points holding it. So if I do this, I can then do my filming, and I've got a nice steady platform doing this, and it will keep things pretty steady. Even if I want to do some movements, by having this around my neck, it's giving it something to tie onto. Also, another thing I like about this camera is it's got an articulating viewfinder. I'm a big fan of this. So if I have the camera low or high, I can see it. And you might have even noticed in the video, there was one point where I had the camera turned this way so that I could actually look at the video from the side. But you can do great video with any camera. As I mentioned, my little mirrorless camera shoots phenomenal video. It's not the camera, it's your eye. It's the same with still photography. People always say the best camera available. What's the best camera? The best camera is the one you happen to have with you. So when you're doing your video, yes, a camera like the Alpha 99 offers a lot of advantages, but a point and shoot can do a great shot as well. In fact, in that Death Valley video, at the end when we're actually heading onto the airplane, that was actually a Hero camera, one of the little tiny video cameras, and it produces great video. Let's see. Someone asked, does the Is this color checker the same one that's used for regular still photography? Yes, absolutely. And if you have one of these and don't have the gray card part, don't despair. You can use the standard white balance card. You just have to be real careful your exposure isn't getting close to the edge. Anything else? Okay, I think that's about it for now. Let's continue on. So what else is important when you're producing videos? Number one, you got to entertain. There has to be something interesting about it, or you're going to lose your viewers. Keeping your shots short, keeping your point of view changing, and adding some interest. Now, entertain doesn't mean you have to make someone laugh, but you want to make it compelling and keep it interesting. And you can do that by making your intent clear. Ask yourself, same thing I always ask people when they're shooting stills, same thing with video. Why are you shooting this video? What is it you want the other person to experience? Show your passion, but also leave them wanting more. Leave them at the end saying, that was pretty cool, I'd like to learn more about that. Also get creative. Where are you going to shoot from? Change your point of view to make the shot more interesting. Also, going back to storytelling, you've got to have a hero. A hero is the who or what the video is about. It could be a person, it could be a place, it could be one of these incredible cupcakes. Have a beginning, middle, and end. Think of it like a comic strip. That's a great way to storyboard it out. And you don't have to be an artist to do this. You can use stick figures. What's the beginning? What's the middle, the end? And maybe is it cutting back? Yeah, you can get into flashbacks later, but learn to do it basically first. Make sure every shot adds to the story. Have your subject with an action. Even if I'm going to shoot something static with a cupcake, I would use a tool like the slider to make it more interesting. This slider, by the way, and you saw it in the video in case you're curious, this is a Cinovate Atlas FLT. It's a really nice piece of equipment. Will really take your videos to another level when you get to that point where you're ready to do that. These things are in the $600 range, but what they do for your video will take them to another level. We'll cover that another day. In fact, what we're going to do is send you, on our follow-up, a link to a series of videos that were done by Victor Ha that are really great on going into some of the gear and what it can do for you. So stay tuned for that. The other thing we want to do when we're doing videos is we want to make sure we're efficient. You've got to have either a storyboard or your story pre-approved. You've got to have a script if it's more than you can just hold in your head. And if your principal's going to be the actor, you're definitely going to need a script, as you probably saw from our blooper reel, which I'll show you again at the end. Don't film more than you need, a lot more than you need. Getting a commercial down to 30 seconds is actually harder than you might think. It was easy to create our first cut at 3 minutes, but getting that down to 30 seconds is actually pretty difficult. And it all depends on where the video is going to live. If it's going to actually go on a local cable TV channel, when they say 30 seconds, they mean it, not 31 seconds. Because if it's 31 seconds, it's going to get cut off at 30. So scripts, let's go back to that a little more. Scripts aren't just the words to be spoken. It can also just describe the flow of the shot list to keep the story flowing. If you don't plan this way, you're going to waste a lot of time. You're going to end up with lots of video to sort through that you really didn't need. It's kind of like going to an event and shooting 3,000 pictures that you're then going to have to look at. What I did was created a short video. In fact, you can see right here, it's just a couple of paragraphs. But since I had my principal, the owner of the bakery, Laura, reading this, she's not an actor. She's a baker, and she's great at it. And she's not used to being in front of the camera. So you have to make it simple. We also had a shot list of 16 different shots. We didn't end up using them all, but all of the shots were very short, so that it allowed us to use cutaways from the speaking to add more interest to the story. And going back to our principal, in this case it was Laura in our video, you want to create a lighting ratio, again using the light meter, that's going to add shape and dimension to the face. And you want to keep these ratios close to being the same from shot to shot. Again, that's going to create consistency. And again, to do that, you need a light meter. Your camera can't read either side. It can only read the sum of light coming back. Since this light meter allows me to take a reading on either side, I make sure those numbers or the ratios are the same. I'm going to get the same look. Also, remember posing. Remember the rule of thirds, because every shot that you're doing with video is basically a portrait. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we're bombarded by horrible commercials on local TV from car dealers, lawyers, restaurants, etc. And this is an opportunity to make money. With planning and coordination, all of the shooting for such a video can be completed in a morning. You can then do your edit in the afternoon, really a one-day project. So you've got your video, you've shot it, and now what? Now, video editing will have a bit of a learning curve, and the more complex the software and the more grandiose your ideas are, the longer the curve. Learn the basics first, then you can add capabilities later on. So what are your choices in software? Well, as I mentioned, if you're a Mac person, you've got iMovie built in. Windows does have a video editor. I'm not a real big fan of it, though. What I'd recommend is looking at two other choices that are both very inexpensive, easy to use, and very powerful. The first one is called Wondershare Video Editor. And again, we'll include this in our follow-up so you don't have to write it down. It's a $39 software that has amazing capabilities, very easy to use. If you think you might want to go a little further in the future, whether it be a Mac or a PC, take a look at Adobe Premiere Elements. Now, Adobe Premiere is a $1,000 software. Adobe Premiere Elements, I just looked it up online for $69. Again, a very powerful software, but relatively easy to use. It will also give you a path up to the higher-end software if it's something you want to do in the future. It exists on both platforms, and there's a free download so you can try the full package for a while. And as I mentioned, both of these softwares, both Wondershare and Premiere Elements, exist on both the Mac and Windows platforms. Later on, you might want to move into Adobe Premiere Pro. That's really become the go-to software for professional video production. Has a very long learning curve, though, so if you want to go that route in the future, start with Premiere Elements. It'll make the transition easier. Now, lastly, you've got our video. Where is it going to live? Well, if it's going to be on your client's website, that's great. No extra expense. You're not limited to 30 seconds. You can go a little bit longer or have an odd amount of time. You might want to put it on a video sharing site. Now, the big four are, if you know the one, I'm sure YouTube has 130 million visitors, I think, a week or something. The next one down from there is Flickr. Flickr is a great video sharing site as well. After that is Vimeo. We put a lot of our videos on Vimeo. It's great for commercial work. And then right after that, in number of visits per week, is Dailymotion. So depending on where the video is going, you might have a little bit different message. So what we did for Laura and the bakery is we produced one for the website, just kind of video action. There's not talking in it because you're already on the website, so you've already arrived there. So let's take a look at that one first. All right, so a couple questions before we get close to getting close to finished here. Someone asked, do I recommend a follow focus? All right, a subject for advanced video. We will send you a link to a video on follow focus. Follow focus are gears and rigs that will actually attach to your lens that allow you to focus without actually having to touch the camera. They're very cool, they're very advanced. You can mark them for your focus points, but subject for another day. Someone asked, is auto white balance on my camera okay to use? I really highly recommend against using auto white balance because it's going to be constantly variable. If you just move your camera a little bit different, it's going to end up giving you a different color temperature. If creating a custom white balance is not something you have time to do or it's not practical in the situation, then pick one of the presets on your camera that match the conditions. If it's sunny out, choose the sunny icon. If it's cloudy, choose that. If you choose auto, it's going to create problems because if you're filming somebody talking and just someone else comes into the scene wearing a different color clothing, let's say they walk in wearing a bright red blouse, that's going to change the white balance on the camera a little bit and it's going to really wreak havoc. So stay away from auto white balance, pick a preset and stay there. But very, very good question. Let's see, what else before? Let's see. Someone asked what memory cards do I recommend, or what size memory cards do I recommend. It's a personal preference. I typically use 16 gigabyte cards. They've gotten so cheap. That's kind of the default that I've depended on. 16 gigabytes will handle a couple of hours worth of video. So I don't want to have more than that much on a single card. Someone asked about books. There's one book, if you're interested in getting into this, one book I'm going to highly recommend. It's kind of become my Bible for getting into video. And it has the, it has the title called How to Make a Video That Doesn't Suck. Search it on the web. It's a phenomenal book. It's got a website that goes with it. It shows a lot of examples, and it's got a lot of links to other things. If you're interested in getting into this more, it's a must-have book. Everybody that I just bought one for my son who's gotten into video. Get it. It's a phenomenal book. Oh, another good question. Audio for music. Someone asked, do I try to use audio in the public domain, or did I buy audio? You might have noticed in my audio at the end of the videos, I mentioned triple scoop music. Now, triple scoop has royalty-free music. You pay for the piece. They're about $60 if you're using it for your own work or for something that's going to end up on the web. If you're buying it for a commercial client that's then going to be put on local TV, there's different pricing. There's a handful of other different sites that I use as well that range from about $39 per piece. Now, the beauty of that is once you pay for that, you have rights to it forever for those projects. So it really isn't that expensive. And it makes everything legal. So I don't do public domain music. It's all royalty-free. Again, when we do our follow-up email, I'll give you the list of my 4 favorite royalty-free music sites. All right. So a couple of you asked about how can I show white balance. Unfortunately, it's not something I can show you because I'd have to show you the inside viewfinder of my camera. And it's different on every camera. On my camera, it's very simple to do. You just have to bring up white balance. Let me see. Let me just see if there's a way to do it here that I could actually show you. Let's see. I think actually, yeah, I can't do it right here, but I could show you on the screen. As I cycle through, actually, Rick, let's see if you could zoom into the back of my camera here. All right, when I hit the white balance button, I've got all these settings. So you can see there's daylight, shade, cloudy, tungsten, and then a bunch of fluorescent tubes. And then there are the presets and their Kelvin temperatures. This one here, which isn't active right now because of the mode the camera's in, is a custom, it says custom white balance. So if I just hit OK on that, it will ask me to take a picture of my neutral reference. I would then grab my card. Actually, since this camera is live view, I can kind of show you it. As I get my card, I just need to fill in the center focusing circle of the gray card and then take that shot. And since I'm in movie recording mode, it can't do it. You actually create the white balance when you're not in movie mode. You create it when you're in camera mode. Then it keeps that as it transfers over into movie mode. But just take a picture and tell it I want that to be white balance, maybe custom 1, and that will be it. It's really that easy to do. Anything else here before we continue on? Because we're just about out of time. Okay, yeah, I think we're getting close. So let's real quick. Cable TV. Why go there? What's the advantage, disadvantage? Well, certainly great reach. You have the availability to target very local and very large groups of potential customers. It does for the business require a commitment, though individual spots are relatively expensive, as low as $2 to run a 30-second commercial, up to $25. And this would include things like the Weather Channel and Food Network and ESPN and things like that. However, cable networks expect you to spend $750 to $800 a month so that there's enough repeats of your commercial spread over enough commercials. So we did take our video and brought it down to exactly a 30-second commercial, which actually took a lot more work than I thought it would, because again, we started with a 3-minute video. But let's see our 30-second TV spot first.
Here at Laura's Sweets, we bake everything from scratch. We use all natural ingredients and local when available. Our cakes are perfect for weddings, special occasions, birthdays, anniversaries, family gatherings, or really any time you desire a sweet and all-natural treat. Let Laura's Sweets create something for you that is memorable, beautiful, and delicious.
Okay, so after you've created this video, you've got it placed, how are you going to get people to see it? Well, if cable TV is beyond the business's budget that you're talking with, there are some other options. Maybe you just want to have a text crawl on a video that will send potential clients to your website to watch the video. You can put a text crawl on the bottom of the Weather Channel for $150 a month, and it will run 24/7, and it will just have a link to the website, and somebody would have to just go to that website and see the video. You can also go to your local cable news websites. They often will sell banners for local businesses. They generally run about $400 a month or so, but that would be a direct link into your website. Take advantage of the free options. You've got Facebook ads that you can pay for, and you can say how much a day or how much a week you want to spend, and each time someone clicks on it, that gets taken out of your little bank account there. Use social media. Use your email, use Twitter, use all the social media outlets that you use just to get the word out, to get the traffic to your website. So wow, I've actually run out of time. Let's sum up. Video with your DSLR can open up a lot of new areas of business and expression for you. I use it a lot for creating my slideshows when I go out and teach. And for me, adding video before a still shows the behind the scenes and the preparation to get a particular still shot. And that combined with audio, I really feel it really is a lot more dramatic. Hybrid wedding videos. When we do a wedding video, it's going to end up probably being 5 to 6 minutes. That's it. It's a highlight of the day. It might have a combination of some stills in it. And that's the kind of thing that ends up living for a long time rather than these 2-hour videos that never get taken out of the box again. Commercial videos for business clients like we just saw here. Senior videos. Something new I've just heard about, senior college interviews videos. Seniors are actually producing videos when they're applying to colleges to try to get colleges to accept them. And also for your own business, self-promotional videos to get yourself some more business. So let's sum up the gear. Learn how your camera's video functions work and react. Use your photography skills. All the posing, lighting, composition applies to video. Trust in a light meter. If you're not using one, get one. It's going to give you consistent results for both your stills and for video. It's going to give you the best shot possible in the camera. Remember, video editing has got a lot much latitude than when you're dealing with raw stills. It's kind of equivalent to JPEG and not even a great quality JPEG sometimes. Think in shots and time. Tell your story. Keep your shots short. When you're recording ambient or voice, use an off-camera microphone system. Keep your edits simple. Stay away from the goofy special effects. Create some cool video samples and show them to your clients and make some money doing it. I want to thank our sponsor, Seconic, for making this possible. And I really want to thank Laura and Maria from Laura's Sweets Bakery in Sugarloaf, New York, for putting up with us and providing us with these incredible cupcakes. In fact, I told everybody in the studio, this one's mine. I've been waiting for this all week. So that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for the great questions. Hope to see you online again soon. Until then, have a great rest of the week and be well. No, that was good. That's good. We can do it.
Store. I can't not look away. Why?
How would you normally have? Okay, good.
Is that good?
Yep.
I did look away one time.
That was okay.
Already.
That was okay.
No, what
she has
am
a
I
degree in
saying?
Fine arts, period.
Okay.
We have a degree in fine arts.
So wait,
And we knew it
made this bakery the perfect thing for us to do.
perfect.
First.
Just try not to make faces after you what I'm saying. Sometimes. Okay. Good. That was good.
Good. Offer to do my headshots and say, you know, I won't even charge you. Just let me put my name on it. Let's do your headshots. Or not interested in what the big box stores have to offer.
That was good.
Desire for a sweet, all-natural treat.
That was perfect up to the
Until the tweet. Relax. Have a cupcake.